Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about silver, the Federal Reserve Bank, the United States Treasury, and 5 macro factors that can impact the value of your stack. As always, this content should never be confused with actual financial advice because I'm not a financial advisor. My approach to holding precious metals like gold and silver as savings in a well-diversified portfolio is not for everyone or every situation. Finally, if you enjoy and find value in this content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. I really appreciate it. Now let's jump in. There are a handful of boogeymen haunting the precious metals market, but few are more ubiquitous than the Federal Reserve Bank and United States Treasury. But what are these institutions and why do they matter to silver stackers? Here is a quick primer. The Federal Reserve Bank, often referred to as the Fed, is the central banking system of the United States. It is responsible for conducting monetary policy, supervising and regulating banks, and providing financial services to banks, the government, and the public. The Fed's primary objectives include promoting maximum employment, stable prices, and moderate long-term interest rates. It achieves these goals through actions like setting interest rates, controlling the money supply, and regulating the banking industry. The Federal Reserve plays a crucial role in the economy by influencing borrowing costs, inflation, and overall economic stability. The U.S. Treasury is the government department responsible for managing the country's finances. It oversees revenue collection through taxes, manages government spending, issues debt securities like bonds to fund operations and manage debt levels, and plays a role in economic policy formulation. The Treasury also manages the federal government's accounts and oversees agencies like the Internal Revenue Service. Its responsibilities extend to international financial matters, including currency policy and debt negotiations. Essentially, the U.S. Treasury is the financial backbone of the federal government, ensuring the stability and efficiency of the nation's fiscal operations. The Federal Reserve can stimulate the economy by increasing liquidity and the money supply through several mechanisms. One primary method is by purchasing government bonds in the market, a process known as quantitative easing, QE. When the Fed buys these bonds, it effectively injects money into the financial system, increasing the amount of cash banks have available to lend. More lending capacity encourages spending and investment by businesses and consumers, which in turn can help fuel economic growth. Increasing the money supply can also depress interest rates. With more cash available, the cost of borrowing decreases, making loans more attractive and accessible. Lower interest rates can stimulate economic activities like capital expenditures by businesses and home purchases by consumers. Moreover, the Federal Reserve manages the pace of economic stimulation by adjusting how quickly it lets its holdings of government bonds mature without reinvesting the proceeds, a process known as runoff. By slowing the runoff, the Fed can maintain its balance sheet size, thereby sustaining the liquidity in the financial system. This approach can provide the benefits of lower interest rates as it continues to exert downward pressure on them without having to lower the federal funds rate directly. Conversely, speeding up the runoff reduces the size of the Fed's balance sheet, effectively tightening the monetary supply if done without offsetting measures. This delicate balance allows the Fed to fine-tune the economic impact without making direct changes to interest rates, providing a versatile tool for managing economic growth and inflation. Heady stuff, I know, but we made it. So what does all of this mean, especially when it comes to stacking silver? When we hear people on the news or on YouTube talk about the Fed or inflation or asset prices, they are talking about these foundational ideas and their opinions on how they are being applied. It goes without saying that here on YouTube, we rarely, if ever, hear folks talk about the Fed in a complimentary way. With this in mind, having a grounding in how things are intended to work helps us maintain our bullshit detector and cut through the discourse we're hearing. Here in May of 2024, one of the major topics is inflation and its impact on the value of the United States dollar. We hold silver for many reasons, but primarily we use it as a store of value to maintain our spending power as its price in dollars increases. We buy silver to just keep up our standard of living. Since March of 2022, the Federal Reserve has been applying the brakes on rising asset prices through both increasing interest rates and the pace that maturing bonds run off their balance sheet. The data would suggest that this financial maneuver has worked. Now, the debate is turning to just how well. Did we land smoothly or smack the tail on the runway? The argument now turns to the lowering of rates, be it to normalize to an economy totally detoxed from a bender of zero interest rates, or as a shot of adrenaline to the heart to save the economy once again. The Fed can hold rates here for longer than anyone expects. It can also raise again to make sure that inflation is choked off. But ultimately, the move will be lower. Lower rates ultimately means more liquidity sloshing around the system and asset prices rise. It takes more dollars to buy the same ounce of silver. So, what should we be on the lookout for? And what does it mean for silver? Here are 5 macro trends to be mindful of as you pile on the ounces. 1. Investment demand increases as opportunity cost lowers. When interest rates fall, the returns from holding fixed income investments like bonds decrease. This makes alternative investments like silver more attractive because the opportunity cost, the foregone returns from not holding bonds, is lower. During the financial crisis of 2008, interest rates plummeted as central banks cut rates to stimulate the economy. The Fed slashed the federal funds rate from over 5% in 2007 to nearly zero by the end of 2008. This period saw an increase in the investment demand for silver, leading to a rise in its price from around $9 an ounce to about $17 by the end of 2009. 2. Inflation expectations. Lower interest rates often lead to expectations of higher inflation. Silver is considered a hedge against inflation because it retains value even if the purchasing power of currency declines. For example, in the early 1970s, the US was ending the Bretton Woods system and inflation was starting to rise. As interest rates were initially kept low in the face of rising inflation, silver prices increased dramatically from about $1.50 per ounce in the late 1960s to nearly $6 by 1974. 3. Decreased yield on other safe havens. Apart from bonds, other safe haven assets like savings accounts also see reduced yields when interest rates fall. This pushes investors to look for better returns in precious metals like silver. After the 2001 dot-com bubble burst, interest rates were reduced significantly to help stabilize the economy. Silver, which had been languishing at around $4.50 in 2001, started to climb, reaching approximately $7.50 by 2004. 4th, currency depreciation. Falling interest rates can lead to a depreciation of the currency, as lower rates decrease foreign investment in a country's financial assets, lowering demand for that currency. A weaker currency makes dollar-denominated assets, like silver, cheaper for foreign investors. We saw this throughout the 2010s, when the U.S. Federal Reserve maintained a low interest rate policy, which, among other factors, contributed to a relatively weaker dollar at times. This coincided with an increase in silver prices, particularly noticeable from around $17 in 2010 to around $35 in 2011. 5. Market sentiment and speculative trading. The dynamics of financial markets are heavily influenced by sentiment and speculation, which can be affected by interest rates. Lower rates may drive more speculative investments in commodities like silver. The period leading up to and during the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic saw global interest rates cut dramatically. In 2020, silver prices soared from about $18 in January to around $29 by August, driven in part by increased speculative interest in precious metals. As you can see, lowering rates is a mixed bag of sorts. While the value of our stacks tend to increase as rates decrease, decreasing rates often are a response to issues within the economy. There are obviously other reasons why silver may rise in price, but they are more outliers and long shots than the regular ebb and flow of the economy and business cycle. This means everything hitting the fan at once, or the dollar losing its place as the world's reserve currency, aren't the drivers for my actions. I know many stack silver for these use cases, but I don't. While it is better to have silver for these black swan instances, in the event that I'm wrong, I'll be the first to admit how brilliant I was for stacking eagles prior to society disintegrating. I think it is more realistic to just continue to keep a reasonable percentage of my portfolio in silver for the boring old reason of being diversified. Being boring tends to lead to the best returns over time anyway. Thanks again for checking in, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.